My name is Robert Axelsen. As I said, you can find me on most of the things at Rob Axelsen. I'm a software developer by day, by profession. I learned to code mainly via FreeCodeCamp. The meetup we are at now is for FreeCodeCamp.org. And I also organize meetups. This meetup here and also Vienna Go, Golang meetup and Vue.js Vienna. And I really love being around the open source and developer geek community. So I keep doing this because it's ultimately fun. If you want to learn more about mine and Daniel's journey to going from learning to code and getting our first developer job, you can go to my website and there's a link to our talk there. Okay, so let's go straight into it. The first obstacle that you might meet, and to preface it, these obstacles are mainly based on my own experience and talking to people, fellow co-students. This is by no means, as of this talk, an exhaustive list, so please feel free again in the questions section to ask. We'll leave room for questions after the talk. So when you're dealing with time, the time might be an issue because I think starting out it's easy to think that, oh, I'll put like 3 weeks into this and I'll really focus and maybe I'll learn a lot. And then you realize after 3 months that, oh God, there's so much to learn. So there's different ways that time can hit you in the face. But I think there are some things to keep in mind to not get too overwhelmed or too impatient. One thing is to accept that learning takes time. Yes, it doesn't take too long to learn the basics of programming. That's one thing that I struggled with. On the opposite of time was that I thought it would take both the mind of a genius, prodigy, or a really, really long time and math skills to learn to program. But I kept having to face that myth or misconception, and I gradually learned that no, it's easier than I thought to learn the basics. But once you have the basics, what you really need to focus on is repetition, and getting better and just doing a lot. So things will take time, but to get the basics and get up to speed, it doesn't necessarily have to take so long time. But just manage your expectations in that learning to code is not something to do on a whim, and you need to be ready to commit maybe several months, half a year, depending on what you want to get out of programming. If you want to learn to code, definitely think longer than 2 weeks. In learning to code, you can also get trapped into spending too much time on stuff that you might realize afterwards weren't giving you as much, or weren't as beneficial to you. So you should, instead of forcing yourself to stick with the course you found, you should rather try different courses, different books, different learning formats, and see what works for you, and what some of the combinations of resources and courses and curriculum and teachers, etc., might speed up things for you. So don't be afraid to experiment. Again, realistic time frame we already talked about, and it helps to form helpful habits. So instead of sitting down and forcing yourself to learn for 2 hours, if you have habits in place and routines where it's not an issue, it's not a struggle to get started, it makes it easier. It's not easy to form habits. It takes commitment in the beginning, but once it's habits, it's a habit. It's much easier just to get going. Doubt is one thing that you can be faced with. I think especially when you're thinking about applying for jobs, even when you've got your first job, or when you've started study. Like I had a wall after like 3-4 months of studying FreeCodeCamp. I was like, God damn it, can I really do this? There's so much left to learn. I loved eating success stories for breakfast. I still do. There's tons of success stories on FreeCodeCamp, the Medium publication. If you just Google it online, there's so much stuff out there. Just talk to people in the audience today. And just remember that everyone started somewhere. So even the most accomplished developer out there, or even the most accomplished speaker slash persona in whatever, pick your programming language stage, started somewhere. Some people, yes, started when they were almost starting to walk, and as like 4 or 5 year olds. But most people started later in life, and there's tons of success stories of people starting when they were 20, 30, 40, 50. There was recently a great article by Quincy Larson, the founder of FreeCodeCamp, on just that topic. Even for experienced developers, Google is your best friend. So if you're doubting how to do this, someone else probably have also asked the same question. Can I really do what I was tasked to do right now, or what I chose to create? So don't be afraid to Google all the time. Don't listen to the haters. It depends a bit on your family and your friends. I've been blessed to not have so many people questioning why I was learning to code, or why are you learning to code and stuff like this. But I know some people have that issue, and it's not easy to just ignore them if they're an important part of your life. But don't give them their opinions too much value. And yes, you can. We have, again, success stories, tons of stories here today of people that have dealt with doubt and still have overcome and managed to learn to code. Resources, mentioning this, and it ties into some of the other things we've discussed. When you are faced with doubt or time constraints, also in the beginning, but when you are hitting a wall and feeling like, oh, FreeCodeCamp is maybe not for me, or you're doing another online course, or you're reading a book, and you're getting stuck, don't be afraid to question the resource that you are using to learn to code. I supplemented FreeCodeCamp first with Eloquent JavaScript, a book, and then gradually more with Udemy video courses. But just don't be afraid to experiment. There's tons of free resources. There's tons of cheap courses. So the main focus on how to deal with resources is don't be afraid to test out things and switch it up. But on the other flip side, don't get too fragmented. Like there's the shiny object syndrome. Of course, you might try to buy every new fancy course and think that that's going to be the blue pill that's going to get you from A to B in 2 weeks. It doesn't work like that, but find something that works for you, and when you find something, stick with it. It can also help to have a mentor. It's not always so easy to find. In absence of that, co-students can be, in my experience, really good to just meet regularly at meetups, take an initiative to meet people for coffee and some talking about code, to give each other feedback, and to have this social sort of pressure to, when you meet someone the next time, oh, I should have completed that JavaScript calculator. Let me just do that before I meet them tomorrow. And pair programming is worth trying if you haven't. There's a lot of online communities where you can meet people and pair program for a session. You can also meet people in real life. Pair programming is sitting together with someone else and coding on the same thing on one screen, normally. Just to not bore you too much, I took in a bonus point here. An obstacle when learning to code can be Vim. If you don't know what Vim is, it's a code editor in the terminal. It's been around since the beginning of Unix times, or not so long, but it's been around for a couple of decades. And it's infamous for being hard to exit out of. So if you just open it up and you don't know how to exit out of it, you probably will not figure out, and you'll close your terminal. But this is more of a joke than a real obstacle. If you want to know how to exit Vim, this is how you exit Vim, just to have that included. So you literally just do escape to have the command section, and then you have colon, Q, an exclamation mark, but you might be normally fine without the exclamation mark. It sounds simple, but on the other hand, it sounds maybe unnecessary when you're just going to exit something. So let's get back on track. Distractions is another thing. As with anything in life, especially with the infamous millennials and all the distractions we have these days, it's easy to sit down and you were going to learn to code today, and then 2 hours later you've been checking everything on YouTube and all the latest JavaScript news or whatever. It's a bit tricky one, because again, for me what helps the most is, I realized the one thing I haven't put here, I'll mention that, but it's habits again. If you manage to do stuff for the right reasons and also form the habits that you need to have the routine that works for you, like every morning for 20 minutes, at lunch or in the evening before you watch your favorite TV series or whatever, that you just stick with some routines and follow them. I liked really the routine of just sticking with FreeCodeCamp and getting the points and getting the brownie points. If I help people at freecodecamp.org via the chat room, you get brownie points with people thank you. Just kind of kept like wanting that statistics of my points to go up. That was a motivating force. One thing I didn't put up here is that it helps to, no, I got distracted, so I forgot what it was. So we'll get back to that. And then again, to the better resources. I think that's the theme of this talk now. But if you get distracted, it might be because the course is not the best fit for you. Maybe you would do better reading a book for an hour than following something video, or maybe tutorials where you get to do stuff as you go along is better for you, and so on. And also one thing, yeah, that's actually, it is here, but I just didn't realize. The thing that I forgot is work on your why. So if you feel lacking motivation or being distracted too easily, it might be because you're lacking motivation really to learn to code. You might rethink why you're learning to code and if it's really the right thing for you now. Maybe it's a better fit in a year, to be honest. Something happened, you're like, oh no, I need to do this for other reasons. But if you don't either have the passion for programming, code, these kind of things, or you have the right reason to do it, it will be harder. It's just a fact. So you can still do it. You just need to figure out how to work on that for you. I've been blessed that I've been loving computers since I could walk and tap on keyboards. I just didn't get into programming until recently. We'll save the questions for after because we are filming, so it's not so easy to take the questions during the filming, but just keep them if you had some. Getting stuck. Again, we've covered this sort of, and we've covered switching up. One thing I want to focus on is that if you feel like you were committing to a course or a material and you're like, yeah, but I can't give up. I'm so invested in this, or for whatever reason. No, it's fine. You can just stop, try something else, and it might work. You might even return to where you were because you learned something from a different perspective. I had that experience with Eloquent JavaScript, reading that for several chapters, and I got the same things that I were explained in the FreeCodeCamp curriculum in a different way, and it was like, aha, now I felt more equipped to tackle the course afterwards. Debugging is a thing where it depends on what you're coding in. It depends a bit on you and how strict you are on debugging with debugging tools in the beginning or not. There are different opinions on this, but whichever way you are debugging with your language, with your set of tools, it helps getting better at figuring out why your code is not working right now. Google, again, as we talked about, if you're doing front end, the Chrome developer tools and getting better at breakpoints and debugging, having debugger as variable name or like a method that you hook into your JavaScript, and it stops in the browser to give you the to stop in time where you are debugging. Those kind of things help. If you don't know much about this and have had problems coding, look into debugging. Just Google it. What helps for me sometimes, and there's been done studies on this, if you are coding and you feel stuck, and this could be professionally or learning to code, it might be good with a context switch where you just force yourself to be like, but I'm in the middle of this, I can make this work. And then you're an hour later, I can make this work. And you're like, okay, stop. Just take a break, 10 to 15 minutes, go for a walk, do something entirely different. And you might be like, but now, and then you go back to it. Or just the fact that you had a break, you go back and you look at it with fresh eyes, very often helps. Yeah, Google again. Okay, so for one of the last points, I think it's the last obstacle we are going over today, is deflation. You might be like, oh, God damn it. I've been trying to learn to code for like 1 week, 3 months, half a year, or more, and you feel like, yeah, you need some motivation. You're like, maybe it's not for me, or whatever. In my experience, it helps to go to meetups or to socialize with others again about that also are learning to code. Sometimes it might help to be proactive. For me, and also know Daniel, it helps to look at motivational talks, documentaries. I love these kind of success stories again, or seeing like how this, 7-year-old kid that was a programming prodigy got into college early and just conquered the world with his iOS apps and those kind of things. And I'm like, if he can do that, I can certainly get further in my course material and stuff like this. Yeah, and ultimately your why. So if you're kind of stuck, ask yourself, why am I doing this? And maybe try to do some self-motivation. Cool. Just to make this talk even more exciting, we're hiring at my company. I mentioned this before, but we're still hiring a front-end or / full-stack developer. We're also looking for a back-end. The profile for both is a little bit more experienced because, yeah, that's the general gist. Have a look or send us an email if you're interested, and if you feel you don't have enough experience, feel free to still approach me or send an email or look at the website. It might still be worth a look for you. Yeah, I work there. I do JavaScript front-end stuff with Vue.js mainly at the moment. Cool. I think that was it. Before we end, I want to reinforce, and I'll follow this up with putting a repo in the comment sections, because I want this talk to be something that people can contribute to. I realized giving this talk that there's a lot of repetitiveness, and there's some stuff that I could maybe, when I'm talking about it, could want to add myself. If people have stuff they would like to add, or feel they can contribute with help on how to overcome obstacles, you're free to help with this talk for the future. Thank you very much.